welcome to Galena LitFest. This is our 7th annual festival. My name is Larissa Disler. I am the Adult Services Librarian at the Galena Public Library, and I also run LitFest every year. 2 years ago, I discovered an organization called Young Chicago Authors. And since then, I've been really lucky to bring in 2 artistic fellows from the organization, Brittany Black Rose Capri and Eman Loren. A lot of you have probably seen them in the past couple of years. They were both talented, beautiful poets. And this year, I have the pleasure of introducing the co-founder and artistic director of Young Chicago Authors. He's also the co-founder of the Louder Than a Bomb Youth Poetry Festival and a professor at the University of Illinois, Chicago. He's also been the author or editor of 10 books of poetry, and he's just an overall really interesting, cool human being. So I'm really excited to introduce Kevin Coval.
Thank you so much, Larissa, for having me, and thank you to the Galena LitFest for existing, and thank you all for spending some time this Thursday listening to some poems. I hope that you aren't sorry you did that. So I hope you enjoy what you hear. And I'm also looking forward to a conversation that we could have in, maybe 20 or 30 minutes or so. I got a lot of poems, of course, but, I would love to also talk with you all and see what's on your mind and be able to engage in a conversation. Obviously, the last bunch of days, last bunch of weeks, there's a lot of things going on, a lot of things maybe changing, or we'll see. But would love to just see what's on your mind and talk with you all. So thank you so much for spending some of your Thursday night with me. I hope everyone is well and healthy and maintaining. And I'm gonna get into it. I'm going to start with some poems that are in my most recent book. It looks like this. It's called Everything Must Go, The Life and Death of an American Neighborhood, which is a book written about my time in a neighborhood in Chicago called Wicker Park, kind of like 92 to 2002. And if you're familiar with the neighborhood or just with the city or with cities, and I think all cities go through this, is that the neighborhood went through a good deal of change during that time, and I was a young, very much struggling artist trying to make a life, and by the time the neighborhood had its way with me and many of my comrades, we could no longer afford to live in the neighborhood, of course, anymore. But I'm going to start with a poem that tributes working people, and particularly waitresses, of which my mom was one. I got lucky. My mom was a very hard worker and struggled a lot, but did what she could to keep my brother and I fed and housed. And so this is about all of those folks. This is called Ode to the Waitress, and I should say that the whole book is illustrated by a very talented young artist named Langston Alston. And so some of the poems, I should say, look like almost like comic books. Some of them look like graphic novels, and then most of the poems have like a visual treatment that Langston had made, including this portrait he did of the waitress. So this is called Ode to the Waitress. Egalitarian nurse, 20% psychologist. You cure our ailments for an hour or whatever under any light night joint condition you find us. It's like you took a Hippocratic oath to kindness. Despite our thirsty advances, you cut down like a lumberjack. Despite the wage gap, mood wed to income. Incomparable actress who brings me and my head-ass homies eggs at 3 a.m. with the grace of a film star in color vision. We all feel lovely when you call us honey. It's not that I can be whoever I wish in front of you, but I can be myself finally without shame. High priestess of the golden nugget who bore extra napkins the morning my aunt passed. Temptress of the barbecue who touched my shoulder when dropping the tab, who loved me for a month and dropped me like the tab. You are all good to my father who holds your hand a little too long every time, and I tell him to stop but get shooed away because this is light work and a heavy lift and maybe a moment to catch your breath in the whirlwind of the weeds. You are a beautiful breed. Excuse us all. Who sees, who serves the people more, our needs and insane demands, our idiot synchronicities, who is more resilient than a mature dervish wheeling side dishes and heaping pots, ballerina of the foretop. You take us in and return us to the world fuller than when we came. So that's that piece called Ode to the Waitress. And, you know, one of the things that I try to do in my writing, I think I've been very much influenced by a tradition of Chicago writers. There's an aesthetic that I think of as realist working class portraiture, meaning, you know, it's I think Chicago artists and artists of all sorts are commenting, reporting, doing the work that Miss Gwendolyn Brooks talked about is verse journalism, but recording the body and labor. And so that's what some of these poems are about, or just kind of looking at the worlds around me and trying to get it down. This is about, I moved into Wicker Park, you know, very early 90s. And my neighbor was incredible, just a kind man. No idea what his real name was. We called him Mr. Rooster. This poem goes like this. Mr. Rooster grows tomatoes and jalapenos in the backyard. He offers me mint and lime, his teeth wide as rows of tombstones. He drinks long-necked bottles of Tecate from a red cooler planted on the porch. He roots on the stoop, watches Beach Street littered with children in the lot across the way. They play on a mattress with an alley cat in the tall weeds sprouting dandelions and purple-headed flowers. His round body posts beneath the moon of a porch light. An indigenous king in baby blue jeans and a dark denim jacket. When he returns from the third shift at the butcher shop, he puts his knife down and washes the blood from his hands. Who knows when it's dawn? We do, when we hear the release of air, the pop of the cap, the first sip as his friend strums a small guitar and night creeps to sun and the sun rises like Jesus or Jesus or poor Lazarus who might have wanted to get some rest or just stay right where he was. The block calls him Mr. Rooster because he sings the Spanish blues, La Melancholia, waking the neighborhood, announcing this new day. And like I say, you know, each poem has its own illustration. So this is Langston's treatment of Mr. Rooster. And I'm going to read, you know, just to end, you know, from this book, I'm going to read the eponymous poem in the book, which is called Everything Must Go. And, you know, of course, the book was heavily influenced by the work of Jane Jacobs, the great, you know, urban planner and social theorist who was writing about the Lower East Side and the East Village in New York. And wrote a great treatise about the ways that neighborhoods and particularly small neighborhoods and neighbors can really care and look after one another. And I felt that in Wicker Park at that time. You know, I would go on the Ave and people would shout my name and I felt looked after. And maybe the place at the time was, you know, maybe considered dangerous in some instances, but I because there was a public aspect to the street culture, and because neighbors really knew one another, I felt very much looked after and cared for. And you know, I think in some ways there's I miss that. And so this is about my community, and again the comrades and the young artists and workers and, you know, community families that I lived with that created this pastiche, this patchwork community, and none of whom are there anymore. You know, that's the thing about gentrification, about you know, so-called development, is that it calls people to a neighborhood, like I was called to the neighborhood, and of course, even my presence helped to push the working class Latinx families that were there, the Eastern European families that were there. My grandfather came there from the Ukraine in 1906, and that community has been decimated by rising rents and property taxes and so on and so forth. So this is the last poem in the book. It's called Everything Must Go. We're looking for work, looking to move out our parents' crib to afford some affordable housing, a 3-bedroom with 5 people, something to imagine a life of our own making. We're 18 and 22, living for the first time with roommates not our blood. We're from the neighborhood and the one over. This one's over. Our parents split and moved to the burbs. Our auntie lives out west. We work at the new restaurant your boss just ate at. We sold as kids weed out back. We boost and rack and claim our sister's kid on our income tax. We live with our producer, our girl's girl, a giant loft of squatters, our shit in a bag. We got the gall to think there's something different than life intended. We're tired of working at the bank or grocer or business our parents moved here for. We drink what the elders left, 7 and 7s, gin and tonics, old turkey and old hats. We're new birds trying to fly. We drop shit like pigeons damn near daily. Styles, projects, habits, visions of what it is and what it will be. We're making it up. We mash up records and tongues. We mess up daily. We step on E with speed to meet Molly. We out here, styling, glammed up, roughneck timmed and roller skates. We house, we rave, we spend whole afternoons blunted watching cartoons for aesthetic clues. We know the names of everyone who works the corner store. We're here to stay until the landlord says everything must go. So yeah, that's the last piece I'm gonna read from this book. And again, the book, which is my most recent full-length collection, is called Everything Must Go: Life and Death of an American Neighborhood, which is available on Haymarket Books and from all your fine booksellers. If it's okay by you all, I am going to read some new poems. I have a book coming out in the spring of 22. And I'm still struggling with the title a little bit, have some ideas, but these are all pretty much new poems, more or less. So I'm going to read, if it's okay with you all, some of the new joints, and then I'll end with some stuff that is very new and kind of pertains to the times we find ourselves in as well. You know, I know Galena a little bit and love it there. You know, of course, it's not far from Chicago. And I write about a lot of things, but I do find myself writing about Chicago time and again. It is a constant muse, and it is a very frustrating city. It's a city that I love very much. And like so many of the great writers who have said this before in different ways, it's a city that will never really love you back. Yet, I continue to write about this big and amazing and horrific place. This is a poem about a mode of public transit, which I find myself on often. I live in Uptown in Chicago, for those that know the near north side of the city. And so I'm constantly taking the red line. This is called Kiss Me Beneath the Red Line. Pardon me. Meet me in Chinatown, where the beams are dressed like dragons, and we can take away lo mein and walk Cermak west to the bridge over the river near the shrimp shack and sit in a hammock of steel. I once had band practice. The rusted factory turned loft and studio. The band broke up. One rainy night, I slept in the bucket I drove in front of cement mixers whirling like pinwheels. Or meet me at Lawrence, across from the Riviera, where I saw the Beastie Boys and Brian Colhane was kicked out for crowd surfing. After the show, we found him in the alley sick. I lost all I'd written in the liquor store across the street. It was 99 and everything was shit anyway. But loss is sad. The Green Mill is close. Nothing better than being there in a booth, cuddled over candles and drinks, or just kiss me tonight before we part on the platform toward Howard, toward Lake to transfer the blue. These two-story iron wishbones strung through skies and alleys like clotheslines are the greatest architecture our city's ever made. Kiss me here as the browns and purples pass express overhead near Dennis's arcade, a late night solace where women were misgendered men in Dance Dance Revolution. I play Miss Pac-Man because there's a chase and a girl, and these repeat like boards or patterns, the therapist I stopped seeing says. At the L&L, the door guy shovels the street inside. We're smashed at the bar, 2 Bushmills and 2 ice cubes each, and all the loud and lousy noise barks orders at the barkeep. But this is the quietest moment I've shared with someone. It is you and I and all the mechanics of chatter house us in private like a blanket at a sleepover. Your head's on my shoulder and you smell like a girl who's traveled the city by bus. Kiss me beneath these ore trunks carried by car, far from a dug quarry, beneath bullets that speed south overhead. Kiss me beneath the red line, under the mistletoe of wire and bolts. This city needs luck of any kind. Winter has stayed too long, so kiss me beneath the red line before we return to our homes and jobs and sober. Make our mouths electric, wheels, our hips grinding, a shower of sparks falling to the street below. That's that piece. Again, in this, in this new book that I am still tinkering with, that's somewhere in there. This is another poem I'm going to read. I think in my mind, this book is very much about trying to find the little things, the mundanities of our lives to celebrate. I tend to, I think, write a lot of odes. I think in part because hip hop as a cultural practice starts as a party. And although, I do write a lot of poems that are critical and political, and I think odes also fit that mark. In this book, I also found myself wanting to celebrate, maybe in part because, our days are dark, and I think in that time, Brecht said, of course, like in the dark times, you will sing of the dark times, and I think that there is some of that, and I also think there's things that we can notice and turn our eye on and turn up for and be present to that make us smile or laugh or feel warm. And this poem reminds me of that. Certainly, this is for one of my friend's nieces, who was 6 at the time I wrote this. I think she's now probably like 12 or something like that. This is called Magic Awesome Everywhere for Maddie. Poems can be made every day. There's art and awesome everywhere. Today you said, poet, make a poem about buildings. My girl's niece visiting from the middle of Illinois, a small town near a state school, a skyline of soybeans. We had salty tofu in Chinatown and could see the old Sears renamed What You Talking About Willis Tower. You remembered it's bigger than Big John. Driving on LSD, you wanted to know the names of all the buildings, the one with the crown, the one with the diamond, and though I'm sure they all have names their companies bought them, I prefer the ones you offered. The best part of the day was when we walked the dog at night, and I told you there was something cool coming up on the corner, so you closed your eyes so it would be a surprise and grabbed my hand until we came across the giant tree at Leland and Manor, where a dozen bird houses, buildings of all sizes hang like gravity doesn't exist, a mini sky world lit by streetlights, a few stars and planes soaring to O'Hare. You gasped at this beauty, this quiet poem in Albany Park, these tiny buildings floating, this magic awesome everywhere. Yeah, that's that piece. Cool. So, this book absolutely gets into like, some, I don't know, like trips through the Midwest and, just a number of different things. And, but it's also about returning to the city and coming home to gaze at stuff in Chicago. But I do want to read a poem that is outside of the city. I was struck. My partner that I live with, we moved her from Denver to Chicago, and we drove her stuff here a few years ago, and in doing so, we drove through Iowa. And I was struck by a number of things, and on the way, kind of was starting to put some of the language together for this piece. So, in the book, I'm kind of all over the Midwest and traveling a little bit as I do a lot with work and with words. And so this is called American Pastoral. Iowans know where to find their men on Sunday, riding the throne of a mini tractor, the land an undulating revelation. Route 92's a roller coaster. Lambs and calves drink water so blue it's black. 1,000 silver canisters rise gold seed reaped beneath the evangelism of John Deere. Monsanto's a jealous pig, tinkerer with genes to modify a master plate race. The long lawns here immaculate like game day. Nature takes no days off. The sky's an ocean, the clouds an O'Keefe. Confederate flags still wave stupid from porches and pickups, though many here supplied soldiers fighting for the North. The earth's a sculpted flat top, a 90 small Ford, arable ground cut with steps and symmetry, and I wonder at the barber, the magic math, rows and circles, farmers who carve fields for us to eat. How can man be so ugly amidst amber rolled hay? I hear a mass shooting in the toothy grins of Casey's general store cashiers, surrounded in all that space, nothing but animals and silence. The gun is a toy, a religion, a rite of passage, a way to play and pass time. The gun is a pet. The sky is so big, I see why the wind would want to tornado, rock barns to toothpicks, driving past the tattered sanctuaries of the Rust Belt. I get it. The dead writer's slow white pen, the squawk of a crow sitting on a fence, a hawk swirling like smoke in a soundless sky. Stillness is a dying language. The country's forgetting, and no one wants to be forgotten. Cool. That is that poem, y'all. So I'm going to read, I think, 2 more poems, and then I would love to have a chat with you all. So as I'm reading, and as you're thinking, please consider what maybe we could talk about. If there's something that you've heard, or something you want to ask about the work, about writing, whatever, what have you. I would love to chat. I'm going to read a poem that's not in this manuscript, that is brand new, and it is part of a campaign that I was asked to be a part of, which I'm very grateful to be asked to be a part of it. It's a letter writing campaign from artists, from playwrights, but it has, and I write for the theater, and I write for screen and TV as well. But I was asked to contribute to this letter writing campaign to address letters to the incoming president, and now the president and the vice president elect at the time. But it's a letter writing campaign where artists in the creative sector are meant to, we're organizing and trying to put some pressure on the administration to consider a number of things, but mainly to kind of be visible and making in the first 100 days the arts a priority for this incoming administration. If you're here tonight, I imagine you probably feel the same. And if you care to look at what this campaign is doing, they have a website called beanartshero.com, and you could follow the hashtag on social media. It's just hashtag artshero. But this is the letter that I contributed, that's been sent to the now president. It's a letter, it's a poem. I don't know about the form, but this is called, I don't even know what it's called. Dear President-elect, the country of your rhetoric, the country allied and together, the country practicing democracy, the country inclusive and just, the country fair and equitable, the country we hope for is a dream we can realize if bridges are built between the most disparate of ideas and people. And what better bridge than a story? The infrastructure you will allocate billions for is necessary, but the ways to construct cities again, to unite urban and rural, to cross the deep divide our country faces is to make us known to one another. And the best natural resource is the people who write and sing and paint and make theater, the thousands in band and tech rehearsals who throw pots and write graffiti and run open mics and community dance classes and curate galleries and public space and make it more beautiful. Mr. President, please invest in our natural resources, those creating a free exchange of ideas, who show us who we could be, who hold a mirror and conjure a time capsule, who haunt our lineage so we may finally learn from the past and be freed to imagine a different future. Mr. President, the artists are the bridge builders, the construction workers of the heart and mind who burrow new paths for us to see one another in new lights and in lights of our own making. We are in desperate need of connection. We have been subsumed in 4 years or centuries of radical unlistening, and let us pause. We can hear a new future unfolding. It is time for the artists to unfurl their imaginations into the public sphere. We need a new course, a town square, a space in every corner of the country where we can slow for a few minutes a day and connect to someone not like us and learn and grow and consider an other side and story and perspective. Art does this, Mr. President. Art is the antidote to tyranny. Invest, invest, invest. A new WPA for the arts to heal our torn and wounded country. All right. Cool. thank you very much, and thank you all again for being here. Thank you to the Galena Lit Festival. I'm going to read just this last joint, which is also a new poem. Mm, I have a new puppy that my partner and I got during in shelter. We were very susceptible to the urge to bring another living being into our home, and we did. She is a very cute mini golden doodle. My partner is hypoallergenic, and so we had to be pretty diligent about the kind of. Oh, I'm sorry. My partner is allergic, and so we had to get a breed that was hypoallergenic. But she is absolutely the best, worst, cutest little creature that I've seen, and she loves to go on walks, and so I get it's an opportunity to go outside a lot more than I think I would in the winter typically, and one of her favorite walks is along the river, the North Branch of the river, which I'm not far from, and when I was walking with her maybe 2 weeks ago on a Sunday, a ton of snow on the ground. This poem kind of occurred to me, and sometimes when I'm without something to write, something to write with on my person, I'll just like take my phone and tell Siri to take a note. And so this emerges as a note in my phone first, and then I've been trying to play with it. So this is called Ode to Under the Bridge. When there is no quiet, the only space you can find to hear yourself breathe, beneath the overhead rustle of traffic and the muttering river, my whole life traceable along the North Branch, where many a gray day I wound my way home, I sought a spot here, the meadow, the porous concrete, where all the weird suburban kids drank Mad Dog and Mickey's, and a clown portrait of John Wayne Gacy hung, meant to keep the normal ones with a good GPA and 2 parents away, while the rest of us lived in the unincorporated, went fatherless, looking for excuses and answers only to discover dime bags in ourselves, a palace of stone and echo, a spot to burn a square or cry your eyes out, a country a few folks know or no one does. Karen Spar took me there the few weeks my girl was gone. A bit further south, graffiti writers congregate and practice throw-ups, a living museum of bubble letters carried on the water's ripple. Drain, Liz, Toro, a gaggle of geese, a couple of ducks, the great robin announcing spring, where the houseless construct pop-up shelters for themselves and one another. They do what the government refuses. Care and take care and recycle and gather one another on the embankment, a nest, a community. I wander with rhymes in my head, trying to get the guts to leave something behind like fall. Word. Thank you all so much. I appreciate you. That was a good 20 minutes or more of me talking straight. So I am going to pause for a moment and check in with you all and see how you're feeling. Would love to hear from you and engage in some conversation if you are down for it. Of course, I have poems all day, but would absolutely love to talk with you all. So if you have a question, I would, and also if you want to come off, just you could come back to the screen if you wish. Thank you, Laura. Good to see you. And if you got something to say, just unmute yourself or throw it in the chat. But would love to talk with you, good folks. And again, thank you for your time. Hey, Catherine. Hey, Carol. Just holler at me and let me know what's on your mind. Hey, Barb.
Hey, Kevin, that was really great. I loved hearing you read in the backstory with everything that you shared. I find myself writing weird stuff and people have called it poetry, but I don't know anything about poetry, so I don't know what makes them feel like it is. Is there anything you could recommend for someone who just doesn't have a clue and wants to learn about poetry and how to do it?
Yeah, sure. I also don't really know anything about poetry, so we share that. I also think that you're probably doing it. It sounds like you're doing it. I think writers write, and so just keep at it. Whatever you're doing seems like it's working. You're finding some ears who are giving you some. It sounds like some good feedback. Um, I think that I think don't be concerned with form, like if it's poem, prose, story, you know, libretto, like who cares about the form? You know what I mean? Just do whatever the thing that's driving you to do that thing. I would say pursue that, because there's some sort of fire, some sort of truth there that I feel like, your person is wanting you to pay attention to and to follow. I think writers can benefit from reading, and I think you have to probably like find stuff that speaks to you, and really pay attention to that. Um, I think that we've been harmed by the way we've been taught poetry in this country. Like like when I was coming up, it was just like, dead white dudes who were getting lost in the forest, and that's cool. That's fine. I'm a white dude, old, and will, eventually will be in that camp too. But I think that we really have to understand that poetry is in our everyday. Poetry is not in a museum. Poetry is something that is in our mouths, in our heads, in our lives, in our streets, in our homes, in our communities, on the regular. And so I think just, it sounds like you're doing it. And I think if it's something that you want to pursue, find who your like comrades are. They might be published, 300 years ago, and they might be folks doing work right now, and so build your own canon. I think in the West, we've done ourselves that disservice of creating a very narrow Eurocentric canon that doesn't include a multitude of voices. That's beginning to change now, of course, because the work people have been doing over the last, forever. But I think like find your people. I would say this to all artists, like find your people, find your tribe, get good critical feedback from them. Also, don't take it too seriously, and just listen to yourself, and you get to make up your own rules. That's the great thing, probably about life, maybe, but certainly about whatever we might consider to be poetry. I think that of course, there's a tradition, and, it can be fun to learn that tradition, or not. I mean, truthfully, I think there's good things to be said about all of it. So, I would encourage you to just continue to do what you're doing, and follow that. It sounds like you're on the right path. I will also say this, Barb, this is to you or anybody. I teach with my good buddy every Saturday. We run a drop-in creative writing class that is free and for the public. We have writers of all ages and also all levels. We have established writers who come. We have novices who come. And it is every Saturday, 1 o'clock Central Time. And I'll put the link in the chat as well. But Barb, you could find out information at youngchicagoauthors.org. It's a youth arts community organization that I'm also the creative director of. But this class is for real, all ages. One of our most promising students is 78 years old, and she is amazing and has been with us for a few years, and in our class has written enough where last year, or I should say at the top of this year, published her first book, which has nothing to do with our class, mind you. She's just incredibly committed and driven and very dope. But just to give you a sense of who's in the space, and again, I as we're talking, I'll find the link and put it in the chat. Yeah, Barb, that was a lot of an answer for a very concise question, so thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. What else, y'all?
Kevin, I want to thank you for sharing your time with us. Really have enjoyed your poetry. And just am really interested in if you would share a bit about yourself, like what influenced you to be the poet you are today? What kind of brought you to where you are?
Yeah, sure. And I can't see who's speaking, so I can't. I will not address you directly. Or who?
Oh, Maria. My name's Maria.
Maria. Hey, Maria. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, let's see. I am. I was born in Chicago, raised on the near north side, in what was called. It was before. Now the neighborhood is called Lakeview, East Lakeview, Boys Town. But at the time it was called Newtown, and it was a neighborhood that was in my memory, like very diverse, mostly Black and Puerto Rican. I'm Jewish. My family is Jewish. We've been Jewish for a long time, and you know, it was a great community. It was a very public community. There was people in the street all the time. My dad knew the neighbors. My mom knew the neighbors. I had kids in the neighborhood I played with. The neighborhood I grew up in was different from the school that I went to. I went a community over to an all-Jewish day school called Anshe. And so early on, I kind of was struck by just how odd the difference was between the neighborhood I was living in and the neighborhood I was going to school in, because one was, you know, looked like everyone in the city, I thought, and one was like really very white and very Jewish. And then that struck me. And then my parents got divorced, and my mom moved us to where her parents were living in the north suburbs. And so that was wild, because that was very white and very white, and that was disconcerting. But you know, thankfully, I was able to go back and forth because my aunt still stayed in the neighborhood, and she was, my dad's sister is 13 years older than him. His parents passed before I was born, and she kind of raised me like a grandma, especially when my mom was dealing with her own addiction and demons and everything like this. And so, you know, a lot of my life has been straddling multiple worlds, going back and forth between spaces that are, you know, white and Jewish, and spaces that are Black and Puerto Rican, and spaces that are, you know, suburban and urban. Just a lot of the straddling, Jewish and non-Jewish. And so, in some ways, that defined, I think, who I was, in the sense that I felt like there was a ton of mistranslation occurring when I was a kid. In my own experience, in my own body. You know, you know, I liked certain things. I did certain things that people in the multiple communities that I was in, no one did all of them. You know what I mean? Like, no one listened to Kool Moe Dee and KRS-One and studied their Haftorah. Do you know what I mean? And so it was like confusing for me, much less everyone around me. And so I had to be like my own synthesis in that regard, and kind of make sense of the world. And I got very lucky, because not only finding hip hop, or hip hop finding me as a young person, was a way to synthesize some of these early ideas, but hip hop also brought me to the library from when I was very young, and got me reading poetry, which, you know, in formal schooling, I did not like at all. I was a bad student. I never graduated from college. I was kicked out of a number of colleges, and barely made it out of high school. I only made it out of high school really because I was a serious basketball player, and our team was very good. But in high school, very luckily, thankfully, by the grace of the Most High, I was introduced to the library. So, you know, Larissa, thank you for being a librarian, right? And any librarians in the building, because the library was free, right? So my mom's, you know, I was a latchkey kid, and the library we could go to, and there were very nice librarians there. It was all women, who, when I came in when I was 14 or 15 years old, and asked, because I heard it in a rap song, who Malcolm X was. Because Run DMC said, we read about Malcolm X in the history text. Jesse Owens broke records. Ali broke necks. And in my schooling, I had never heard of Malcolm X, but Run DMC said it. So I thought I needed to be, you know, in the know. And they introduced me to Alex Haley's autobiography of Malcolm X. And I read that, and I brought that back, you know, probably with some late fees. But they, you know, they brought me back to that same stack. And eventually I made my way through a number of books, and found a book of poems. Hold on, I'll get it. Yeah, I found this book of poems called The Black Poets, edited by Dudley Randall. It came out on his Detroit-based Broadside Press in, I think, the 50s. And I read this book when I was 16, and it was, I cried when I read it, when I was sitting, you know, cross-legged in the stacks of the public library, because it was the first time I had read Miss Gwendolyn Brooks and Sonia Sanchez and Nikki Giovanni. And it was the first time I read a poet who, in the book, is named Don L.E., who later changed his name to Hakeem Madhubuti. And reading him particularly, it felt like reading hip-hop. that I was listening to, but I was reading it in the book. And it reminded me of the voices that I heard in the community that I was born in, the community that I went to visit my aunt in. And I was reading it in the book in a library, and that felt significant. And there was some sort of connection there then that I felt like I felt called to do something similar. Like I too wanted to record the voices and the stories of those around me. And so I got really lucky. You know, at 19, I was interning for the first Black senator from the state of Illinois, Carol Moseley Braun, in Washington, D.C., because I thought I wanted to, you know, be the first Jewish president. I realized pretty quickly into that experience that, you know, I indeed did not want to do that. And I decided at 19, because also in D.C. they had a public library that I could get books at. And that summer I just read and wrote and read and wrote and read and wrote. And at 19, near the Potomac River, I in my mind, I decided I wanted to be a writer. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew that I wanted to dedicate my life to it. And so, you know, I feel very lucky that I knew at 19 that that's what I wanted to do. And, you know, everything since then has been in support of trying to find the time and the space to pursue that dream and that craft.
Kevin.
Yes.
I was very taken with your poem advocating the arts as a means of healing and of reaching across the divides that we have right now. Have you published that, or is there any way that we can have that poem? I would love to spread it. I think the Arts Alliance needs that. I think Illinois Humanities would love that. I just found it wonderful and would love to be able to share it with a lot of other people, because I think that's so important right now.
Well, Carol, you are very kind, and I appreciate you. I'm going to, as we are chatting, I also am going to find the website in which the text lives, and on my social media, I'll put all of these links in the chat. But there is a website. I will put it in the chat. It is called beanartshero.com. But again, I'll put it in the chat. And I appreciate that. And I agree with you. I think that, you know, this is certainly a time for us all to kind of harness our creative imagination and really think about the public space and the civic sphere, because clearly what we've been doing has not been working. Even, you know, before 4 years ago, you know, I think that, you know, we can't just pretend like 4 years ago everything was great. You know, we've had these issues in this country chronically, and I think we need a new way of thinking to address them. And I think, oh, thank you, Larissa. Yeah, so the Be an Arts Hero is in the chat. I'm also going to put, you know, Barb, I'm also going to put, this is the link to our class that we teach every Saturday. That again is free for all writers. Would love to see you all in the class. Carol, I'll also put, I have a link to me reading the poem as well on my social media, and I'm going to find that and put it in the chat as well. But thank you. No, thank you very much, and agree with you. Okay, what else, y'all?
Kevin, I just wanted to say something. I thank you for reading your poems, and I love the action and the strength of your voice. And I could really place myself in that Iowa poem that you wrote. And I love the letter that you wrote to the president about the arts.
Thank you so much, Bernadette. I appreciate that. That Iowa poem, I think that's the first time I've ever read that in public. So thank you for validating that too.
Very good.
You know, thank you. Yeah, because that is, you know, as you could imagine, like reading something for the, you know, the thing about writing is that you know, this is my workspace, this is my office, and I do it alone. And who knows when what I write will ever, if it ever does, get to anyone else. And so that it does and that it's received, Bernadette, that really means a lot to me. And so I'm glad that it reached you and that it made sense of any kind, because, you know, when you're writing, who knows? I don't, you know, sometimes you're just like, is it, you know, am I doing this? Is this the right thing? So thank you. Catherine, I see you have your hand patiently raised.
Oh, I'm fine. I'm inside a bar, so I came outside waiting. I am super nervous because I've been a big fan for a long time.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm guessing we're about the same age. But let me see. I got my notes here on a Post-it note on a car outside.
This is amazing.
It's not a lot. It's just that I only have a Post-it note, so it takes a little bit. But I don't really necessarily have that much interesting to add, except that I think you're really neat. So whatever I say, I just want to hear all the neat things you might have to say about it, even if it's really minor, like I have to go use the bathroom right now.
Okay.
I'm from Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, born and raised, and I'm 50 years old now. So that puts me at about rites of passage at 1985 or ish. And the Channing Murray was the Quaker church back then, and we used to do poetry readings there, and it was a strange, safe place for this like little teenager to go and like chain smoke cigarettes and talk to grown-ups about weird puberty writing, and puberty writing is very different than adult writing. But what really made me think about that was that it was really neat how it encompassed encouraging being brave about talking about whatever was in your brain to other people, or in your brain to other people, and how that changed to slam poetry, to beat, to how the spoken word cadence has changed from as quickly in the mid 80s from to like just 95 even, and how now it is more mainstream. Like, so to start that whole question with, it started with, you're really neat, and I just want to hear you tell me what you think has changed in cadence from the 80s to now. And P.S., do you have any resources to ASL poetry, like anyone doing narration with the same cadence in their sign language, as I have a son that's deaf, and that would be really cool to like have some resources for that.
Yes.
And I love you. If I didn't already say that, thank you very much. Galena may be small, but it is mighty, and we love you.
Well, I really appreciate you, and
thank you.
I'm really touched by your question. I want to say, and Larissa, I hope that when we resume any kind of in publicness, I could come be there specifically. When this was booked a while ago, I think even before we went in shelter, I really was so excited because I wanted to be in Galena, because I really like Galena a lot, and think it's a beautiful town, and shares a lot with Chicago in that way. I've always thought of anything in Illinois, but the Midwest in particular, like we just share so much. This Rust Belt realism. All of us kind of suffering post-industrialness and figuring it out afterwards. But Catherine, to your question, to address the ASL thing, first of all, there is a great documentary called Deaf Poetry that maybe you've seen. If you're not familiar with it, check it out. We've worked with them before. The Arts Org, where I'm the creative director, Young Chicago Authors, has ASL at a lot of our public events, and of course love working with folks who sign, because it is its own movement, it's its own art, it's its own dance, and to then pair the two obviously begins to be this really rich collaborative process where it's not necessarily a perfect translation, but there's something that exists so beautifully in the hybridity of the form, and I'm really interested in that. And so check out the DEAF poetry online. I think you could find it. And then if you stay in tune with what Young Chicago Authors does, once our events in our festival get toward the finals and semifinals, there is usually an ASL person or persons who help us in that moment. To answer your first question just about cadence and how poetry has developed and evolved since the 80s, I think, for me, hip hop drew me to want to write, period. Hip hop introduced me to poems that I liked. Hip hop MCs, rappers called themselves poets, And so I wanted to be a poet because rappers call themselves poets. And I think part of what hip hop is owed credit for is many things. And one of them is that it has democratized all of these art forms that have typically been withheld from the masses. When we think of music composition, visual art, certainly poetry, even kind of finer forms of dance, we think of them as things that are taught in prestigious schools. We think of they're taught. You have to pay money to receive this education. But what hip hop did is that it radically democratized these forms and gave them back to the people without apology. And I think the great thing then, since the 80s specifically, is that there's so many more people now who claim the title of poet and artist and dancer and beat maker or what have you. And so I think that poetry then sounds like the people. I think that there is sometimes in any art form, there's a trope that exists. If any one style becomes too prominent, there's a trope that exists. And I think those tropes can be, they run their course. But I think the great thing about, where we're at right now in poetry is that probably, poetry, particularly after yesterday, and Amanda Gorman's kind of like stealing the show at the inauguration, poetry has probably never been more popular, maybe in the history of the world, than it has been today. And I think so much of that credit is due to hip hop as a cultural practice, and so many of the artists, particularly the artists of color, and probably particularly Black women, who have made the form a continually viable space for community gathering and also catharsis and critique. And of course, in Chicago and really around the world, the matriarch of all of this is Miss Gwendolyn Brooks. And I'll show you, I keep her chapbook on my desk. The chapbook is called Riot, which is also published by Dudley Randall's Detroit-based Broadside Press. But this picture of Miss Gwendolyn Brooks looks at me every day when I write, and I usually write every morning at the same time for the last 30 some odd years, and I keep this picture because it's like Miss Brooks is looking at you like, you better do your work. You know what I mean? Like, she's like, I do not play. Do your work. At least that's what it means to me. And so I think poetry, obviously, Catherine has evolved, and I think evolved for the much better and the much more inclusive, and I think therefore has also made the form like that much fresher than it has been at any time in its history, I would say. Larissa, how are we doing? We're doing okay?
Yep, we're doing okay.
Okay, cool. If there are any more questions, happy to take them. What's up, Kevin McNulty? Good to see you. Basically, my boss is in the building, y'all, so now, I'm kind of nervous. And Alan Weinberger, good to see you, sir. Certainly could take another question or two. Also happy to close out with the poem, whatever you all are feeling. So, and Catherine, do you have another question, or are you good? No, you're good. Okay, cool.
Quick one, Kevin. Do you ever listen to other people read your poetry, and how does it make you feel to hear someone else read it?
Yeah, I mean, it's look, it's like Bernadette had said, or when I was talking to Bernadette about, it's amazing that anyone has ever read anything of mine, right? Period. And then to have somebody else recite your work feels very intimate. It feels like, you, like your whole person, your whole humanity is being read in that way. I get a kick out of it, of course, and one of my books, A People's History of Chicago, is curriculum in Chicago public schools, and so every spring or whatever, I'll get like a new batch of students who are doing recitations of the work and using it in a variety of ways, and I think it's amazing, and I also think it's funny, and it's also embarrassing for me because sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe that line isn't very strong. You know what I mean? Once the work is out, I don't think about it too much because I'm already very neurotic, and I really am just trying to get the next poem right. And so I try to do a good, kind of Buddhist practice of just letting go whatever I put out into the world. But I am, to your question, I'm very humbled by that, and of course, like always, pleased and tickled, and just really think it's incredible, because if you would have asked me, when I started, at 19, if now, whatever later, somebody's going to come back and then, present a poem that I wrote to somebody else or in front of me, I'd be like, yo, that's impossible, So yeah, I think it's pretty cool. Cool, y'all. Larissa, should we end it out on a poem, or are we at time, or what do you think?
Sure, I do have a question.
Oh yeah, please. I don't mean to cut you off.
No, it's okay. In your bio, it says that you've shared a stage with Nelson Mandela.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what that was.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and part of the reason why it's in the bio is because I like to contrast. It says I shared a stage with the Migos and Nelson Mandela, not at the same time, but just to speak at the spectrum of possibilities. I was in South Africa for a few months at the turn of the millennium, which is obviously now a long time ago, and I was a part of this youth council that was visiting an event they had in South Africa. I was there for two reasons. I was there for an event called African Battle Cry, which was a all Africa b-boy hip hop battle and competition that called all the genres together. It was a all Africa graffiti battle. And they also called rappers together, b-boys and b-girls together, DJs together, to have like a month-long competitive, festival. And it was easily like the freshest thing I'd ever seen. I was also visiting as part of a youth contingent an event called the Parliament of the World's Religions, which was an event that, of course, was in Chicago in 1893. They celebrated the centennial of that event in Chicago in 1993, and I got involved with the organization, which its mission was to kind of organize organize interfaith dialogue and bring communities of people together from different religious traditions in order to find spaces of commonality and shared ideology. Obviously, noting that there are great differences and honoring those differences, but also bringing together people in order to build a sense of camaraderie and communalness. And so this crew of young people from all over the world gathered in South Africa, in Cape Town in '99. And I was asked to put together a performance of young people right before Nelson Mandela gave the keynote. And so, we had like this, I don't know, it was like basically a musical. It was like a hip hop musical before, like 20 years before hip hop musical. There are 10 years before hip hop musicals, but with people all over the continent. And then Nelson Mandela got up and did his thing and crushed it. And yeah, that was that moment.
Thank you.
No, of course, thank you.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions before we close out here? No?
Kevin, I hope that you do come to Galena.
I appreciate that. Well, yes, encourage Larissa to bring me back, y'all. You know what I mean?
Of course.
Yeah, no, I would love to. I would be honored, and yeah, very much look forward to it. So thank you. Y'all, I'm also going to put in the chat. I mean, it's I'm very findable on social media, including Facebook. It's just at my name on everything, and so Barb, if you have poems you want me to read, or if you have questions about whatever, please feel free to be in touch. I'm most active on Instagram, I would say, but pretty active on some of the other spaces too. Larissa, should we ride out, or should I close out with a piece?
If you could close out with a piece, that'd be fantastic. There were a lot of people who came in kind of after you had finished reading the first set of poems. So.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Yeah, cool. So this is, this might be like one of the, so I'm going to read from this new manuscript that again comes out in the spring of next year. So Larissa, maybe I could come back actually and read this new book. Hopefully, maybe at that time I'll have it in hand. Perhaps, we'll see. But this poem is called "The Most Beautifulest Thing in This World," and it ends on a theme from William Carlos Williams. It goes like this: "The most beautifulest thing in this world is the lakefront at Foster Ave on a Saturday in July, when the high's in the mid-80s and the water's igloo cooler cold, which keeps no kid out and no family from packing a day's worth of fire and food and hand-portable tunes. The melting pot's a myth, because 100 countries show out today, sand-colored kurtas, multi-patterned kaftans, Jordan jerseys, bikinis, and burqas. The world's outdone itself, and everyone's here despite the city's insistent segregation, land, sky, and lake, where the maintenance of border and other is broken down. Afghanis play touch football long enough to become bros. Sudanese grill Hebrew Franks, and Latinx children are very much with their families. Ice is melted, except the paletas. The man who fused a refrigerator and bicycle together stands for 1,000 years. The sun's made his skin the color of tobacco, lines in his face, and the line for his cool, a canyon. A group of fully clothed women are unbothered in hijabs, dunking each other in refreshing water. Aunties laughing and splashing like little girls. Ghanaian stews and charcoal feed the air and the heat, and children chase a soccer ball onto another patch of grass no one owns unless we all do. A mother has a moment all to herself, while the two boys discover the porousness of land and lake. She sways, gazing at the horizon, the point where sky and earth miscegenate freely. Hands off development, hands off government, hands off displacement. Let us chill. Imagine what'll happen if we can't. Make the old warehouse a condo barn if you must, but leave the lake to the people. Let us sit here till sundown, till the giant Midwestern sky turns the whole place purple enough for a print show. Let us gather our kids and load up the car and scramble to Migos for an Italian ice in a baby cup. All of us deserve it of something so sweet and so cold." Thank you all so much. Appreciate you, Galena. Thanks for hanging out with me on a Thursday night.
Thank you for joining us, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you, Larissa. Thanks for having me. Thank you to the Galena LitFest and all the organizers. Shout out all the librarians, all the readers.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.